Hey guys, Matthew here. So in this video I'm going to show you how to use the camera to assist your workflow in producing renders that you might not use in your daily modeling and drawing practice. Just because in rendering it's important that you have a lot more specificity and control over how the camera works, and this is not necessarily true in other modes of production. So I'm going to click on this little arrow, I'm going to hit Viewport Properties, and you'll notice that a little box comes up on the right hand side. Now, if you're using Rhino 5, you'll get a dialog box pop up on the screen in front of you. But don't worry, they're exactly the same. You'll notice that there's 3 to 4 options here. So there's Viewport, Camera, Target, Wallpaper. And for now, I just want to draw your attention to Camera and Target. So the location of the camera, along with its rotation, which is actually something we really never want to touch, and its target's location are kind of stored here. So a camera is a thing that looks at something, and the thing that it looks at we call the target. So I'm not going to really get too deep about how you can manipulate these because I'm going to show you a much easier and more intuitive way in a bit. I just want to draw your attention to the lens length option along with the projection option. So firstly, the lens length. So if I make that bigger, so if it's currently at 50, if I make it something like 180, you'll notice that this line here looks extraordinarily parallel to this line here. And if I go back to 50, let me zoom in a bit more, you'll notice that although they do look a bit similar, they're not the same angle. And as I decrease that number, you'll notice that they begin to splay more and more. So the verticals here are a great option. Example, so this is going quite far that way and quite far that way, and as I look inside my scene, if I change it to something like a lens length of 1, we get some crazy Zahari kind of thing where things blow out towards the camera and it's extraordinarily difficult to control. What's happening here is that we're seeing more and more and more in the lens of the camera. So in one view we want to have a lens length as low as we can, right? Because we can fit as much as possible and explain as much of our project as we possibly could. But the problem is that space itself begins to distort in a way that's not extraordinarily communicative. So what we really want to do is balance this number somewhere between 50 and 60, which are traditionally kind of given out as numbers, along with 55 as something that maps to the general human vision, and 1, 20, 25, to begin to actually fit as much into our scene as possible without distorting it too much. Now, although everything does look kind of vertically parallel, how I've got it, I'm going to decrease the lens length to 1 more time. I'm going to zoom around, and I've got a line here which is clearly splaying to the left and a line here that's clearly splaying to the right. From a photography perspective, humans like straight vertical lines, and it's something that we pick up on, and it will make composing your panels much easier if there are vertical lines that you can begin to associate a grid to. And this is really easily fixed because in Rhino the camera has a 2-point perspective option. So the perspective option is technically a 3-point perspective option, and when we go 2-point you'll notice that the vertical projection of the perspective is flattened and just made into vertical straight lines. So that's really easy to begin to work with. So I'm going to change my lens length again, and I'm going to sit there and start setting up a particular kind of view that I might want to work with. So let's just, for now, assume that I'm happy with this, and it might be a little bit off, so we want to be able to actually physically manipulate the camera in quite an easy way. So for that I'm now going to double click on the word perspective, and I'm going to move into my foreview, and I'm going to make sure that my O snaps are off because they actually make this process extraordinarily difficult when you begin snapping it to things and the camera moves drastically. But I'm going to make sure that perspective is highlighted, so perspective is in blue. Then I'm going to go View, Set Camera, Show Camera. And you'll notice that the camera appears in these 3 views. If I move it in the perspective view, the other 3 views update. So the camera is defined by all of these components. So firstly, we have the camera itself right at this corner, and if I move it around, it'll move the location of the camera. So I can move it wherever I want. I can move it so it's probably at human height, which makes a little bit more kind of sense for the production of an architectural image. So that's where your camera is. The next one is this kind of middle dot, which moves the entire rig. The entire setup can be moved forward and back. So if I zoom out a bit to look at the camera, notice how nothing is deforming. So the triangle stays kind of constant, the triangle being this one. And if I click on this point here, and I click to move it, and I can zoom out so you can see a bit better, that it shrinks the size of the triangle. Now finally, we've got to be very, very careful with this point here, because we want to select a particular point in it. So if I select that, you'll notice that nothing much happens, but if I select the middle here, this one right there instead of the one at the top, it moves the target, which is the direction the camera is facing. Sorry about the lag there. We need to be very, very careful when we select this one, because it actually relates to rotation. Or is it this one? No. So you can accidentally rotate the camera, but if you end up accidentally selecting the wrong node and rotating the camera, this rotation option here allows you to return it back to 0. So if you've got your file, just sit there, play with it, and set the camera up however you would like, and you can always just press render and you'll get a kind of a basic shot. So that's the basics of how to begin to play with a camera, to begin to want to set up a perspective view. Next time I'm going to show you the side of the work we want to do in the V-Ray asset editor in order to actually begin to get the proportions right and perhaps give us a better idea of how much this thing is actually going to render. So I'll see you in the next video.